Returning though for a moment to the mild hierarchy universal, much of this conversation we've been talking about how our genes play a role in the erection and then the subsequent structure of societies, but not so much how individuals' genes might put them into different positions in social networks.
That's right.
And is there much work done here? So I'm reading right now Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, and I talked to Paul Bloom recently as well. I'm not sure if this came up there.
You've been speaking to all my friends. Danny's a friend and Paul is a friend.
Yeah. And Steve, that's great. You have really good, really smart friends. But I mean, if somebody's got a square jaw, they're very likely to be, they're more, all other things being equal, they're more likely to be put into a higher place in an organization if they look a certain way, this sort of thing. But I'm wondering if there's much work that you've looked into relating to how people get placed into social networks based on their genes.
So I'm less interested in that.
I can imagine that that's very controversial, and you could, yeah.
Well, it's not so much that I'm shying away from controversy, but I'm my sort of characterologically, I'm a kind of optimistic person who thinks good of the world and likes to focus on good and happy things. And I spent a lot of my time earlier in my career studying death and end of life care. So it's not like I haven't studied sad things, but at the moment, I'm sort of interested in accentuating the positive or studying positive qualities that humans have. I'm also more interested in universals than in non-universals. And so, but it is the case, as you suggest, that people will be randomly assigned, as we talked about earlier, by the natural lottery. I mean, some people will be born with severe developmental delay, or some people will be born with anencephaly, no brain. They die within days of hours of birth. That's totally unjust and is a working of the natural lottery. People will be born with all kinds of advantages and disadvantages. And this is a fundamental fact of being an animal, which we are. In addition, there's a social lottery, and this has been appreciated by philosophers for thousands of years. Thomas Jefferson writes magnificently about the social lottery, and Aristotle does, Plato does. I mean, they're and often. Well, anyway, that's another topic. But I think it's the workings of the social lottery that typically forms of government should try to stop. Right? Like we have a sense that both can be unjust, the natural lottery and the social lottery, but we have a sense that the social lottery is especially unjust, right? And that we might, for example, want to implement progressive taxation to undo the workings of the social lottery. We might also want to provide for public funds to have Braille signs everywhere so that people who are born blind because of the natural lottery, we as a society are going to try to redress the workings of the natural lottery. And so I do think about these things, and I certainly do talk about them in Blueprint, but I'm less interested in studying, the genetic determinants of schizophrenia or diabetes or developmental delay than I am in studying the genetic determinants of social order. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yes, you did. You totally did. Well, to end, what I wanted to ask is if there are any problems or maybe strong points in today's culture. Maybe we should restrict ourselves to the United States that you can identify because they're either in tension or copacetic with the 8 universals in the social suite that you've identified.
Well, I think, there's this, in the book, I talk about how B.F. Skinner, the behavioral psychologist at Harvard, who did all those famous experiments with pigeons, and he writes a novel called Walden 2, which becomes a bestseller unexpectedly. And some people buy this book, this novel about a fictional, it's actually about a professor and his students, sort of odd, who set out to make a kind of society that was guided by the principles of behaviorism, which happened to be Skinner's expertise. So it's a novel about a communitarian movement, a commune, the establishment of a commune guided by behaviorism. The novel becomes a bestseller. Some people buy this novel and then actually use the novel to set up real societies. So there's some communitarian societies that are set up that I discuss in the book, one in Mexico, one in Virginia, that use this novel as a guide for how to organize their commune. And so I don't intend for Blueprint to be like that. I don't intend for the book to somehow be a guide for political arrangements, even though I think it's very relevant, I think, to how you have a healthy organization or a good organization or a good company or a good society. I mean, the title of the book is The Evolutionary Origins of a Good Society is the subtitle of the book. And of course, it has a very almost prescriptive title, right? Blueprint is a pretty powerful word. I'm not unaware of these things. So having said all of that, I'm wary of making political pronouncements, but I will say the following thing. One of the things about the social suite we haven't talked about is, you mentioned it, is individuality. And it's sort of almost a paradox that in order to be a social species, we have to have an individual identity. And in our species, we use our faces to do this. We communicate our individuality through our faces. All of our kidneys to do their job should work the same and look the same. But for our faces to do their job, they should all look different. And actually having a different faces is an evolutionary luxury. I mean, ask yourself, why don't we all have the same face? I mean, we don't. And the capacity to have different faces is an evolutionary luxury. Not only that, but you can recognize different faces. And this takes a huge part of your brain is allocated to facial recognition, to saying that this person is not that person. So the ability to communicate individuality and to detect it is an evolutionary luxury. And it is required for social life, because if you want to be able to signal this, I am your offspring, feed me, or you've had sex with me, not someone else, or you owe me something, not someone else. I was nice to you, not someone else. You should repay the favor. You need some way of signaling this is me and the other person to be able to detect it. So individual identity is a crucial part of the social suite. By the way, if you lived on your own, you wouldn't need to do that, right? Like, again, the irony is that our capacity to communicate our individuality requires someone else. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother. There's no one else to perceive it. Why would we have an individual identity? So when you look at our current political problems in our society, they come from this kind of tribalism. Earlier, picking up the example, we have 1,000 people that are divided into, 10 groups of 100 people, and they're fighting with each other, these divisions. And there are basically two ways to address that conflict, both of which have political predicates in our society. One way is to recognize that these divisions are arbitrary and to go up a level to the group of the population, to say we are all Americans. And this is like the science fiction trope, when the aliens invade, all of the previous divisions between countries and within countries are thrown out because we all are united against a common enemy. We're all human beings. And you have this kind of sensibility that we are all together. And so one way to address the divisions in our society is to go up a level and say, look, we are all Americans. And in fact, this is something that has been appreciated as a feature of our society for hundreds of years. De Tocqueville writes about this, writes about this sensibility that anyone can be an American. We're a nation of immigrants. You just come to this country and you buy into certain principles and you're an American. Other societies, by the way, aren't organized this way. It's very difficult to become Japanese or become Swiss, politically. But anyone can in principle, become an American. So that's one solution to our problem, is to go up a level. But the other solution to our problem is to go down a level. one of the solutions to the tribalism that's so ascendant right now, that says, well, you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're black or you're white, or you're Christian or you're Muslim, or all of these divisions in our society, is to go down a level and to recognize that we're all, first of all, unique individuals, and that our membership in these groups is arbitrary and maybe not so important. And this is actually Martin Luther King's solution, right? Martin Luther King says, I look forward to the time when my children will be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. That we see each other as unique individuals, not as mere members of the purple flagged or the green flagged group. So these solutions to our current tribalism, which is causing us so much problems, are solutions that exist in us already. We have access to those solutions. We can go up a level and see ourselves as part of a greater whole, or we can go down a level and see each other as unique individuals worthy of respect and cherishing.